The afternoon Marcus Whitfield arrived at Hargrove Preparatory Academy. The sky over the city had the kind of pale, washed-out quality that sometimes comes in early October when the light is still present, but has stopped committing to warmth. He parked his car, a dark gray sedan, nothing remarkable about it, in the visitor lot on the south side of campus. The same lot he had parked in 14 times before over the course of the school year. He wore dark slacks, a plain white shirt, and a light jacket he had grabbed from the back of his office chair before leaving the building. He had not planned to come today. A board meeting scheduled for 4 o'clock had been canceled that morning, and he had called the school office to let them know he would be picking up his daughter early. The woman who answered had confirmed it, given him a reference number, and told him to stop at the front security desk. He had done all of this. He did it the same way he did most things, quietly, thoroughly, without expecting complications. The front entrance of Hargrove Preparatory was a set of double glass doors framed in dark steel, with a security desk positioned just inside. The desk was staffed at all hours during school days, a policy the school had introduced 3 years ago, following a series of incidents at comparable institutions in the district. Marcus knew this because he had read the proposal when it came before the board. He had voted in favor of it. He pulled open the right side door and stepped into the entrance corridor. The floor was polished pale stone, and the ceiling above it was high enough that the ambient sound of the building lockers in the distance, a teacher's voice somewhere upstairs, the soft hum of an HVAC system arrived as a kind of low institutional murmur. On the far left wall, running the full width of the corridor, was a large photograph of the school's newest building, a glass and concrete structure that had opened the previous spring. Beneath the photograph was a plaque. The plaque read in clean serif letters, Whitfield Family Wing, Hargrove Library and Learning Center. Marcus did not look at it as he walked past. He had seen it before. The woman at the security desk was named Diane Ashcroft. She was 61 years old, had worked at Hargrove for 11 years, and wore a lanyard printed with the school's crest. She was speaking on the desk phone when Marcus approached. She held up one finger without looking at him, the universal gesture for wait, and continued her conversation for another 45 seconds before hanging up. Then she looked at him. "Can I help you?" she said. Her voice was the tone of a person who asks questions as a way of creating distance rather than seeking information. "I'm here to pick up my daughter," Marcus said. "Her name is Zoe Whitfield, 4th grade, Miss Okafor's class. I called this morning and spoke with someone who gave me a reference number." He set his phone on the desk with the confirmation email visible. "I was told to check in here." Diane looked at the phone briefly, then looked back at him. "Do you have photo ID?" "Yes." He produced his driver's license. She took it, typed something, and then typed something else. She spent a longer time than was necessary looking at her screen. "It says here the pickup authorization was added today," she said. "Right, because I called today. My meeting was canceled." "We generally ask for pickup changes to be made at least 24 hours in advance," she said. "The person I spoke with didn't mention that requirement," Marcus said. "She confirmed the pickup and gave me a reference number." Diane's expression did not change. There was no hostility in it exactly. It was more like a practiced neutrality that could be adjusted in either direction depending on circumstances she had already decided were unfavorable. "I'll need to verify with the office," she said. "You'll need to wait here." Marcus stepped to the side. Zoe's 4th grade class ended official instruction at 2:45, and the hallways would be busy within the next few minutes. He had come a little early so they could avoid the rush. He waited. To his left through the glass, he could see the path that curved around the side of the main building toward the new library wing. A group of 3rd grade students was filing past it in a line, led by a young teacher he didn't recognize. The students wore the school's gray and green uniform backpacks, bouncing most of them mid-conversation with the person ahead or behind them. A girl in the back of the line was carrying what looked like a papier-mâché project with one hand and trying not to drop it. The teacher noticed and moved to help her. It was the kind of small, unremarkable moment of care that Marcus had found himself paying attention to more in the 2 years since Zoe had started at Hargrove. He watched who noticed the child in the back of the line. He watched who moved without being asked. He had been waiting 4 minutes when the glass door behind him opened again. The man who entered wore a charcoal suit with a pocket square and moved through the entrance corridor with the brisk confidence of someone who expected the furniture to rearrange itself around him. He nodded at Diane as he passed the desk. He did not stop. He did not show ID. He did not produce a reference number. Diane waved him through. Marcus watched this. He watched the specific quality of the nod, the angle of it, the ease with which it was returned. He noticed that Diane had not looked at her computer screen before waving the man through. He noticed that the man had not slowed down. He turned back to the desk. "Excuse me," he said. "Is there an issue with my verification?" Diane looked up from her phone, where she appeared to now be in the middle of a text conversation. "I'm waiting for the office to call back," she said. "The man who just came in," Marcus said, keeping his voice level. Level the way a well-built table is level, because something underneath it has been carefully measured. "He didn't check in." "He's a regular," Diane said. Marcus looked at her for a moment. "I see," he said. He did not say anything else. He moved to the row of chairs along the wall and sat down. He crossed one leg over the other and rested his hands on his knee. Behind him, through the glass doors, the afternoon continued. A bus pulled up at the curb. A teacher appeared at the top of the staircase across the lobby, looked down, and disappeared again. Zoe found him before the office called back. She came down the main staircase with her backpack zipped tight and her jacket half on one arm, still searching for the second sleeve, because she always put on her jacket while walking rather than while standing still. She saw Marcus from the second landing and broke into a run, which the school technically discouraged in the lobby, and which Marcus never corrected when she was running toward him. "You're early," she said, reaching him. "Meeting got canceled." "The whole thing?" "The whole thing." She leaned against his arm, still breathing slightly fast from the stairs. Then she looked up and passed him at Diane's desk. "Why were you sitting there?" she asked. "Waiting," he said. "For what?" He looked at the desk. Diane was back on the phone. He could not tell if she was speaking to the office or to someone else. "For things to sort themselves out," he said. Zoe considered this answer with the kind of careful, slightly skeptical attention she applied to most of the things adults told her. "Did they?" she said. Marcus looked at the man in the charcoal suit, who was now speaking to a teacher near the staircase, laughing at something. He looked at the plaque on the wall. He looked at Diane, who had not yet looked back at him. "Not yet," he said. A minute later, a different woman appeared from the hallway behind Diane's desk. A young staff member Marcus hadn't seen before, with a yellow visitor lanyard and a slightly rushed expression. She glanced at her screen, then at Marcus, and said, "Mr. Whitfield, I'm sorry for the wait. Everything is confirmed. You're all set." "Thank you," Marcus said. He picked up Zoe's backpack from the floor where she'd dropped it and handed it back to her. He did not look at Diane as they walked to the door. Zoe did, though. Kids always looked at the thing that made an adult quiet. Outside, the October air was cool and specific the way October is in cities where the trees are old enough to change colors slowly. Zoe slipped her free hand into his as they walked toward the car. "Dad?" she said. "Yeah?" "That lady at the desk. She was weird to you." Marcus unlocked the car. "She was doing her job," he said. Which was the kind of thing he said when he wanted Zoe to keep asking questions rather than accept the first answer. Zoe got into the back seat and buckled herself in. "But the other man didn't have to wait," she said. "No," Marcus said. "He didn't." Zoe chewed on this while Marcus pulled out of the parking lot. Outside the window, the Whitfield family wing caught the afternoon light. its glass panels reflecting a sky that was already beginning to thin toward evening. "Are you going to do something?" Zoe asked. Marcus checked his mirror before merging into traffic. "I'm thinking about it," he said. His phone buzzed on the console. He glanced at the screen. A message from the school's legal counsel, a woman named Patricia Ewan. "Board chair confirmed, Thursday meeting. Full attendance expected. Marcus, just a heads up. There's been a complaint filed this week about front desk protocols. Might be relevant." He set the phone face down and drove. 3 days passed before Marcus went back. He used those 3 days the way he used most waiting periods, not passively, but with a kind of deliberate stillness that people who didn't know him sometimes mistook for indifference. He went to work, he answered emails, he made breakfast for Zoe every morning and dropped her at school before 8, using the regular parent drop-off lane at the back of the campus rather than the front entrance. He watched the school the way you watch something you built, with the particular attention of a person who knows what the foundations look like. On Tuesday morning, he sat in the drop-off lane for a few extra minutes after Zoe had jumped out and jogged toward the door, her backpack swinging in that slightly chaotic way it always did when she was already thinking about something else. He watched the other parents. Most of them were moving with the efficient distraction of people who had already shifted into their next obligation, a phone call, a meeting, a commute. A few were out of their cars, walking their children to the door. He saw one mother crouch down to retie her son's shoe on the pavement. He saw a grandfather in a light blue windbreaker wave until his granddaughter disappeared through the door. He saw the same security staff rotating through the front entrance. Not Diane worked afternoons. The morning shift was a younger man, darker complexion, efficient and courteous. Marcus had never had a problem during morning drop-off. On Tuesday evening, he called Patricia Ewan. "The complaint that was filed," he said. "What was it about?" There was a short pause. Patricia chose her words with the care of someone who had been a lawyer long enough to know that pauses were sometimes more useful than sentences. "A family," she said. "Last spring. Mother came to pick up her son during an unscheduled window. She was kept waiting at the front desk for over 20 minutes. Another parent, she described as, and I'm quoting here, not someone who looked like her, was admitted without any delay." "Same desk?" "Same desk, same afternoon shift." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Outside his kitchen window, the city was settling into its evening configuration. The distant sound of traffic thinning a neighbor's light coming on across the courtyard. "Was anything done about it at the time?" he said. "A note was placed in the file," Patricia said. There was something careful in the way she said it, the flatness of someone describing an institutional response they find inadequate. The head of facilities reviewed it with Diane and determined it was an isolated incident of miscommunication. "It wasn't isolated," Marcus said. "No," Patricia said. "I don't think it was either." He thanked her, ended the call, and sat for a moment at the kitchen table. Across from him, propped against the fruit bowl, was a drawing Zoe had done that weekend of what she called a map of the most important things. It included the kitchen, the tree in the backyard, her school, her father's office, and in the upper right corner, labeled carefully in her handwriting, the library Dad built. The letters were slightly uneven, the way handwriting is when someone is concentrating very hard on getting something right. Marcus had not told Zoe he built it exactly. He had said that the family's foundation had helped fund it, and that this meant a lot of kids would have a good place to read and think. Zoe had asked if that meant she could go there whenever she wanted. He had said yes, within school hours. She had seemed satisfied with this. He had not told her about the board. He had not told anyone at the school who he was, beyond what was printed in the legal documents. That was the arrangement the Whitfield Family Foundation donated through a trust. The trust's representative sat on the board under the family name, and Marcus attended meetings, cast votes, and reviewed budgets in a room full of people who knew him as Marcus Whitfield board member, rather than Marcus Whitfield, the name on the building. He had wanted it that way. He had wanted Zoe to go to a school where she was just Zoe, not a donor's daughter, not a name on a plaque, just a kid in 4th grade who liked maps and stayed late on Fridays to practice times tables with Ms. Okafor. He had wanted it that way because his mother had raised him to believe that doing good things quietly was a form of integrity, and because he had sat in enough rooms full of people who gave money in exchange for visibility to know that was not what he wanted his life to look like. He thought about his mother for a moment. When he was 11, she had come to his school. Not Hargrove, a different school, public in a neighborhood that had fewer trees and more unfinished sidewalks, and had been stopped by a woman at the front desk who asked her twice whether she had an appointment. His mother had not had an appointment. She had come because he had forgotten his lunch. The woman at the desk had made her wait while other parents moved freely. His mother had said nothing to him about it afterward, but he had been watching from the stairs where the older kids waited during dismissal, and he had seen her face through the glass of the front door. He had seen what it looked like when someone chose not to react. He had learned something that day. He was still learning what it meant. On Wednesday, he drove past Hargrove at 3 in the afternoon. He did not stop. He went slowly enough to see the front entrance clearly. Through the glass, he could make out Diane at her desk. He could see 2 parents at the window, one being attended to, one waiting. He noted which one was waiting. He continued driving. On Thursday morning, he received the full agenda for the following week's board meeting. Item 7 on the list read, Front Gate Security Protocol, Review, Proposed Policy Standardization. Someone else had already put it on the agenda. He did not know who. He made a note to find out. And then, on Thursday afternoon, Zoe called him from the school office phone. "Dad," she said. Her voice had that particular compressed quality it got when she was managing something larger than she wanted him to know about. "Ms. Okafor wants to talk to you. She says it's not an emergency, but it's important." "What happened?" he said. "Nothing happened to me," Zoe said, which was not quite an answer to his question. He arrived at Hargrove at 2:15. This time, when he walked through the front doors, Diane was at her desk. She looked up when he entered. He saw the half-second in which she processed his face placed him and rearranged her expression from neutral into something more careful. "I have a meeting with Ms. Okafor," Marcus said before she could speak. "I called ahead. Reference number." He showed her his phone. The verification took 6 minutes this time. He timed it on his watch, not because he planned to do anything with the number immediately, but because numbers were evidence, and evidence had a way of becoming useful. While he waited, the glass door opened again. A man in a tweed blazer entered. He was perhaps 50, with the kind of unhurried manner that comes from never having had cause to hurry. He approached Diane's desk. Diane smiled at him, a genuine smile, not the practiced neutrality she had given Marcus, and said, "Good afternoon, Mr. Hartwell. Dr. Finch is expecting you upstairs." He thanked her and walked through without slowing down. Marcus watched. The man did not show ID. The man was not asked to wait. Marcus looked at Diane. Diane was looking at her screen. A second later, the young staff member from Monday, the one with the yellow lanyard, appeared from the side hallway. Her name tag read, Priya. She looked at Marcus, then at her screen, then said, "Mr. Whitfield, you're confirmed. You can go up." Then, in a slightly lower register, as though the sentence was meant only for the air between them and not for the desk behind her, she said, "I'm sorry about the wait." Marcus held her gaze for just a moment. She looked young, mid-20s, he guessed, and there was something in her expression that was more specific than professional courtesy. It was the look of a person who has witnessed something they disagree with and has not yet decided what to do about that disagreement. "Thank you, Priya," he said. He said her name clearly, which he did deliberately, because names had weight, and he believed in letting people know they had been seen. Upstairs, Miss Okafor was waiting for him in the doorway of her classroom. She was a tall woman with reading glasses pushed up into her hair, and a habit of speaking in very precise, complete sentences, which Marcus appreciated. She told him that Zoe had earlier that week intervened when a classmate was being excluded at lunch, had noticed the exclusion had moved her tray, had sat down next to the child, and had said something quiet to the others at the table that had apparently shifted the whole situation without drama. Miss Okafor had not seen Zoe do this. She had heard about it from 3 separate students independently. "I wanted you to know," Miss Okafor said, "because it was a remarkable thing for a 9-year-old to do, and she hasn't mentioned it at home, I'd guess." "She hasn't," Marcus said. "She gets it from somewhere," Miss Okafor said. Marcus looked through the classroom window at the rows of empty chairs and small desks, the letters of the alphabet in cursive along the top of the whiteboard, the plant on the windowsill that someone had remembered to water. "Her mother," he said. Ms. Okafor nodded slowly, the way people do when they understand they've been given a piece of information that has significant weight and should be held carefully. "She's a wonderful kid," she said. He found Zoe waiting for him in the hallway, sitting on the bench near the water fountain, with her feet crossed at the ankle and her library book open in her lap. She looked up when she heard him, searched his face for information. "You're not in trouble," he said. She let out a breath that confirmed she had been at least partially worried she was. "What did Miss Okafor say?" "Good things," he said. Zoe closed her book and stood. "About the lunch thing." He raised an eyebrow. "It wasn't a big deal," she said with the tone of a person describing something that was, in fact, a considerable deal to them, but that they had decided not to be visibly proud of. "No," Marcus agreed. "It wasn't." They walked to the staircase together. At the bottom of the stairs, before they reached the lobby, Marcus stopped for just a moment. He looked through the glass at Diane's desk. He looked at the Whitfield family wing plaque on the wall. He thought about the complaint that had sat in a file and changed nothing. He thought about Priya's expression, and about the man in the tweed blazer walking through without slowing down, and about Zoe at lunch, moving her tray next to someone who needed to not be alone. He thought about what his mother's face had looked like through the glass of a school door, and how she had chosen to say nothing, and how her choosing to say nothing had cost her something, and how it had also taught him something invaluable about timing. He had his phone in his pocket. He had the board meeting next Thursday. He had Patricia Ewan's number and 3 years of documented committee attendance. He had his name on a building and hadn't said a word about it to anyone who mattered here. He was not going to say a word yet, but he was going to say something. The request for a meeting with the school's vice principal was made by email at 8:47 on Friday morning from Marcus's personal address. He worded it simply. He was a Hargrove parent and had experienced a concern about front entrance protocols on 2 separate occasions that week, and he would appreciate 30 minutes to discuss. He did not mention the board. He did not mention Patricia Ewan. He signed it with his first and last name only, the same way he always did. The vice principal, a man named Gordon Leary, replied within the hour. He was available that afternoon at 4. Marcus arrived at 10 minutes to 4, which was a habit he had developed over years of meetings early enough to be respectful of someone else's time, close enough to the hour that it did not give the impression of anxiety. He went through the front entrance. Diane was at her desk. He presented his ID and his confirmation of the meeting without being asked, which he did not out of deference, but out of a decision he had made 3 days ago to document every interaction at this desk going forward. Diane verified his information with the same careful slowness she had applied each time. She did not make eye contact beyond what the transaction required. He waited 4 minutes. Then he was admitted and directed upstairs. Gordon Leary's office was on the 2nd floor in a corner that looked out over the back athletic field. Leary was a compact man in his late 40s, with a neat haircut and the manner of someone who had worked in school administration long enough to have developed a specific set of reflexes for managing parent complaints, expressions of measured concern, the slight forward lean. The practiced repetition of a parent's concern back to them in slightly different language to show they had been heard. Marcus recognized these reflexes. He had sat across from enough people in enough rooms to recognize when someone was managing rather than listening. "Mr. Whitfield," Leary said, shaking his hand. "Thank you for coming in. Please, have a seat." They sat. A tray of water had been set on the desk. Leary folded his hands and assumed the expression of someone who was prepared to be reasonable. Marcus described the events of Monday in full. He described Diane asking for documentation that was not required of other parents arriving at the same time, the extended wait period, the verification process that took well past the point that his information had been confirmed. He described the man in the charcoal suit. He had not been able to identify him specifically, but he described the interaction accurately. A brief, smiling exchange with Diane, a wave through no ID, produced no waiting. Then he described the same pattern with Mr. Hartwell on Thursday, and Priya's apology. Leary listened with the forward lean. He nodded at intervals. When Marcus finished, Leary said, "First of all, I want to thank you for bringing this directly to us. That's always the right first step." Marcus said nothing. He waited. "I want to assure you that our security protocols apply equally to every visitor," Leary said. "Diane has been a trusted member of our staff for over a decade. She takes her responsibilities very seriously." "I don't doubt she takes them seriously," Marcus said. "The question is whether she applies them consistently." "I understand why it might have felt inconsistent," Leary said. "These situations are sometimes more nuanced than they appear from the outside. A parent who has been coming to this school for many years, Diane may know them by sight, and when someone's face is familiar, a shorter check-in process is a natural consequence of that familiarity." "My face wasn't familiar," Marcus said. "You're relatively new to the Hargrove parent community," Leary said with a warmth in his voice that was intended to soften the implication of what he'd just said. "I've been enrolled here for 2 years, Marcus said. "Yes, of course. But you mentioned you rarely come for pickup." "My schedule means I'm usually not available for pickup. I come to school events. I've been here for curriculum night for the spring fair for the book drive in April." He had listed these specifically because he had checked his calendar before coming. "I've been here 14 times since September of last year." Leary's expression remained carefully pleasant. "I'll certainly speak with Diane," he said. "If there was a lapse in our standard protocol, we want to address that. But I'd also ask that we give the benefit of the doubt to a staff member who has served this school faithfully for 11 years. "I'm not asking for punishment," Marcus said. "I'm asking whether there's a pattern." "What do you mean by a pattern?" Marcus looked at him steadily. "I mean that I'd like to know how often this particular desk delays or denies entry to parents who don't look like the parents who are waved through. I mean that I'd like to know if there's a file somewhere with a complaint from a mother who waited 20 minutes last spring, while a parent who, in her words, didn't look like her, was admitted without delay." The quality of Leary's expression changed. It was subtle, the warmth pulled back, slightly tightened at the edges, like something being recalled. But Marcus had been watching faces in meeting rooms for long enough to notice. "I'm not aware of such a complaint," Leary said. "It was filed in May," Marcus said, "with the front office. It was reviewed by the head of facilities and classified as an isolated incident of miscommunication." There was a pause. "I'll look into it," Leary said. "I'd appreciate that," Marcus said. He stood, thanked Leary for his time, and left. In the hallway, he took out his phone and made a note of the time, the date, and the key points of the conversation, including Leary's exact phrasing, "benefit of the doubt," to a staff member who has served this school faithfully. He noted that Leary had not denied the complaint's existence, only claimed ignorance of it. which was a different and more interesting position. On his way down the stairs, he passed Priya, who was heading up with a folder of papers. She saw him, and something in her expression acknowledged him with a kind of careful attention that said she knew why he was here and had possibly wondered when someone was going to come. "Priya," he said, stopping briefly, "how long have you worked at the front desk?" "1.5 years," she said. "Do you enjoy it?" "Well," she glanced toward the staircase, then back at him. "I like the job," she said. "I don't always like the way some things are done." That was a sentence with edges on it. Marcus recognized the kind of courage it took to say it to a stranger in a school hallway where the walls were effectively institutional and everything was technically on the record. "I see," he said. "Thank you for telling me that." He descended the rest of the stairs and stepped into the lobby. Diane was at her desk speaking with a parent who was leaning on the counter in the relaxed posture of someone who had done this before without friction. Marcus crossed the lobby toward the exit. He passed the plaque on the wall without looking at it, then stopped. He looked at it. Whitfield Family Wing, Hargrove Library and Learning Center. The letters were in the same clean serif font that the school's design committee had chosen from the 3 options he had reviewed and signed off on 2 years ago, sitting in this building's boardroom on the 3rd floor with a cup of coffee and a copy of the architectural rendering in front of him. He read the plaque for the first time in a long time, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to acknowledge something. The woman at the desk behind him had looked past it every day for more than a year. The name on the wall had not changed anything about how she saw the man who walked in from the parking lot. That was useful to know. He turned and walked out through the glass doors. In the parking lot, he called Patricia Ewan. "Thursday's board meeting," he said. "Is there still a slot open on the agenda for unscheduled discussion?" "There's an open floor period at the end," Patricia said. "About 20 minutes. "I'd like to use it," he said. A pause. "For what topic?" "Front entrance security protocols," he said, "and what the board's responsibility is when those protocols are applied unequally." Another pause, longer this time. He could hear Patricia Ewan thinking the specific quality of silence that a careful person produces when they are deciding how much of what they understand to say out loud. "I'll add you to the agenda," she said finally. "Marcus, do you want me to flag it as routine or flag it as..." "Flag it as significant," he said. "Done," she said. He got in the car and drove. Zoe had aftercare that afternoon and wouldn't need picking up until 5:30. He had time. He stopped at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the school and sat at a table by the window and opened his laptop. He had 3 documents to review before Thursday: the current security protocol, policy, the complaint from May that Patricia had forwarded him, and the minutes from the last facilities committee meeting in which the front desk procedures had been discussed and no substantive changes had been made. He read all 3, carefully making notes. At the table next to him, a woman was helping a young girl with what appeared to be a 2nd grade reading assignment. The girl was sounding out a word she didn't know, a long word, more syllables than she was ready for, and the woman was not giving her the answer. She was sitting quietly, waiting for the girl to get there herself. The girl got there. She looked up with the wide, slightly astonished expression that children have when they discover that a thing they thought was too hard turned out not to be. Marcus closed his laptop. He had everything he needed. He drove to pick up Zoe. The board meeting was held in the school's 3rd-floor conference room at 6 o'clock on Thursday evening. The room had a long rectangular table, 12 chairs, and 3 windows that faced west. So by the time the meeting began, the sky outside was the deep, specific blue of late evening in October. Not quite dark, not quite light. The kind of sky that seemed to be making a decision. 11 of the 12 board members were present. The 12th, a retired architect from across the city, had sent his apologies by email that afternoon. Marcus arrived at 5:50, poured himself a cup of coffee from the credenza near the door, and took his usual seat, third from the left, near the windows. He said hello to the people around him, answered a question about the capital fund timeline, and did not give any indication that this evening was different from any other board meeting he had attended in the past 3 years. Patricia Ewan sat at the end of the table nearest the door. She was the school's legal counsel, officially an advisor rather than a voting member, but she had attended every meeting Marcus could remember, and her presence in the room had always carried a kind of quiet authority. The authority of someone who had read all the documents and remembered all the footnotes. She met Marcus's eyes briefly when he sat down. She gave him a small, composed nod. Dr. Claudia Finch, the school's head of campus and principal, sat at the head of the table. She was 63 and had been at Hargrove for 22 years, longer than the current library building, longer than the current security desk, longer than almost anything else that had changed about the campus in that time. She ran meetings efficiently and was known for expecting clarity from the people who sat in the chairs around her. She opened the meeting at 6:03 and moved through the items on the agenda at the pace of a person who genuinely enjoyed the procedural aspects of governance. Items 1 through 6 passed without significant discussion. The capital campaign was on track. The facilities audit had 2 outstanding items. The annual fund's early numbers looked strong. A proposal for extended library hours was approved unanimously, which Marcus noted with the small private satisfaction of someone who had made a specific argument for the library being worth funding well. Item 7 was the front entrance security protocol review. Vice Principal Leary presented a brief summary of the proposal, which involved standardizing the ID verification process across all shifts and introducing a digital check-in system that would reduce the subjectivity of individual staff decisions. He framed it as a routine modernization effort. He did not mention the complaint from May. He did not mention Marcus's visit to his office the previous Friday. When Leary finished, Dr. Finch looked down the table. "I understand there's additional comment on this item," she said, and she looked at Marcus. Marcus set his coffee down. "There is," he said. He spoke for 8 minutes. He described the events of Monday, October 2nd. He described them the way he described things in rooms like this, with specificity, without embellishment, in sequence. He described Diane's request for documentation, the extended wait, the tracking of the reference number. He described the man in the charcoal suit. He described Mr. Hartwell. He described the second visit on Thursday and the meeting with Vice Principal Leary and Leary's response, which he quoted from the notes he had taken in the hallway immediately afterward. He then described the complaint filed in May and the response to that complaint, and the fact that nothing had changed between May and October. The room was quiet in the way that rooms are quiet when people are listening and also doing the work of understanding the implications of what they're hearing. Then Marcus said, "The issue is not one staff member making one mistake. The issue is that when a staff member was told about a mistake, the institution's response was to put a note in a file and do nothing. The issue is that the same pattern occurred again 5 months later, and the institution's response was to ask me to give the benefit of the doubt to the staff member. The issue is that a child stood in the lobby of this school and watched her father be treated as though he had less right to be there than the man who walked in behind him. And the institution's response to that child has been, so far, nothing." He stopped. He picked up his coffee. Several of the board members were looking at him in a specific way, not with surprise exactly, but with the recalibrating attention of people who had not fully understood until this moment what kind of weight was in the room. One of them, a woman named Carol Wynn, who ran an education nonprofit and whose children had attended Hargrove 14 years ago, had her pen in her hand and was not writing anything. Dr. Finch was looking at Marcus with an expression that was careful and entirely still. She had the quality he had noticed over 3 years of someone who was almost always thinking 1 or 2 steps ahead of the conversation currently happening in the room. "Marcus," she said, "I want to say something, and I want to say it clearly." "Please," he said. "What you've described is serious, not as a matter of protocol, as a matter of the school's fundamental obligation to every parent and child who walks through that door. If what you've described is accurate, and I have no reason to believe it isn't, then we have failed in that obligation. And that is not a failure I'm prepared to classify as a note in a file. Leary had not spoken since his initial presentation. He was looking at the table. Dr. Finch continued, "I'd like to formally request that Patricia review the camera footage from both dates and prepare a documentation summary for the board." She looked at Patricia Ewan, who nodded. "I'd also like to request that the front desk protocol review move from item 7 to a priority action item with a working group convened before the end of the month." There were nods around the table, and then Carol Nguyen, who had been quiet until now, said, "Dr. Finch, I want to note something for the record." She paused. "Marcus has attended this board for 3 years. He has voted on every significant policy decision that's come before this table. His family's foundation funded the construction of the largest academic facility on this campus." She looked around the table. "The staff member who denied him access to this school was sitting in a building his family paid for." The room was quiet. Dr. Finch looked at Marcus. Marcus looked back at her. "We need to be clear," Carol continued, "that the injustice here is not that this happened to our biggest donor. The injustice is that it happened, and that it is almost certainly not the first time it has happened to someone in that lobby. And that the first time it happened, we put a note in a file." There was a silence in the room that was different from the silences that had come before it. The kind of silence in which people are not deciding what to say, but deciding what kind of people they are going to be in response to what has been said. The door to the conference room opened. A man stepped in, the school's administrative director, Gerald Park, who did not usually attend board meetings. He had a tablet in his hand and an expression that indicated something had arrived that needed the room's attention. He looked at Dr. Finch. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said. "Patricia, I've got the camera log from the front desk, both days, and a third incident that's in there that neither of us knew about." Patricia Ewan stood. Gerald Park set the tablet on the table in front of her. Patricia looked at the screen. Then she looked at the room. Her face had a particular quality, the very specific expression of a lawyer who has just confirmed what she already suspected and is now deciding what the next step is. She looked at Marcus. Marcus looked back at her steady and unhurried, the way you look at something when you have been waiting for it without rushing it. He had been calm throughout calm, the way a very still room is calm, not because nothing is in it, but because everything in it has found its weight and settled. "Gerald," Dr. Finch said, "will you stay for a few minutes?" Gerald Park pulled out the chair next to Patricia and sat down. Outside the windows, the sky had made its decision. It was dark, now fully, specifically, October dark. The campus below was empty and lit by the pale glow of the pathway lights, and somewhere down there, behind glass and stone, and the letters of a family name carved in clean serif type, the school was still and waiting for whatever came next. The conversation with Diane Ashcroft did not happen that Thursday evening. It happened the following Monday at 9 in the morning in the small administrative office adjacent to the front security desk, the same desk where she had asked Marcus to wait while a man in a charcoal suit walked past her with a nod and a smile. The office had one window, 2 chairs, and a table that was too large for the room, which meant everyone who sat at it was slightly too close to the door. Diane sat across from Dr. Finch and Patricia Ewan. Human Resources was represented by a woman named Sandra Cho, who had a notepad and did not use it much. Gerald Park was there to present the camera log. Diane had been called on Friday and told to report on Monday. She had spent the weekend, Marcus suspected, deciding what posture to take. When she came into the office, she chose a posture of calm dignity. The dignity of a person who believes they have done their job correctly and is prepared to say so. She said so. "I followed procedure," she said when Dr. Finch summarized the events of October 2nd. "That's what I was trained to do." New pickups added day of are flagged for additional verification. I verified. The verification took 9 minutes, Patricia said, after his reference number had been confirmed. I was thorough, Diane said. Mr. Hartwell was not asked for his reference number, Patricia said. He was waved through. Mr. Hartwell has been a Hargrove parent for 8 years, Diane said. I know him by sight. Mr. Whitfield has had a child enrolled here for 2 years, Dr. Finch said. You told him yourself that he was not a regular. But he has attended 14 campus events since last September. He has been to this building 14 times. You have worked every afternoon shift for those 14 visits. There was a pause. Diane said, I can't remember the face of every parent. The footage from the third incident, October 6th, shows you speaking with another parent at the desk while Mr. Whitfield stood waiting. The conversation lasted 4 minutes and had nothing to do with the security process. Patricia turned the tablet toward Diane so she could see the timestamp. This isn't about one day. This is about a pattern that the footage documents across 3 separate visits. Diane was quiet. Her hands were in her lap. She was looking at the table, and Marcus, who was not in the room, but who had been briefed by Patricia in full afterward, would later think about what Diane's face might have looked like in that moment. Not the face of a villain. He had never imagined her as a villain. He imagined something more complicated than that. A woman who had spent 11 years making small decisions that felt like judgment calls, who had been rewarded for those decisions with nothing, not praise, not reprimand, just continuation, and who had never been put in a room where someone laid the decisions out in sequence and asked her to look at them all at once. The previous complaint, Dr. Finch said, from May, the mother who waited 23 minutes. Diane looked up. That was a miscommunication, was it? Dr. Finch's voice was not unkind. It was the voice of a person asking a question they already know the answer to, and are asking anyway because the person across from them needs to hear themselves respond to it. If you'd been asked at the time to review your decision-making, would you have found a consistent application of the protocol? Diane said nothing for a long time. Outside the window, the morning was moving forward without particular concern for what was happening in the room. The ordinary sounds of a school day beginning, students arriving, someone running in a hallway 2 floors up. Then Diane said, I think I was doing what I believed was my job. I believe you, Dr. Finch said, and she paused. And I also believe that what you believed your job to be was shaped by something that was never spoken out loud, but was understood. That there were parents who needed to be checked, and parents who did not. And that understanding was never challenged here, because when it showed up in a file, we put a note in it and moved on. She stopped. That is a failure of this institution, not only of you, but it is also a failure of yours. What happens now? Diane asked. You're placed on administrative leave effective today, pending a full review, Sandra Cho said. The review will include the footage, the complaint from May, and any additional incidents identified through staff interviews. At the conclusion of that review, we will make a determination about your continued employment. Diane nodded slowly. She gathered her things without hurry and stood, and for just a moment she looked at the window where the campus was going about its morning in the pale October light. Then she walked out. The door closed behind her. Patricia Ewan let out a slow breath that was not quite a sigh. Sandra Cho wrote something in her notepad. Dr. Finch looked at the empty chair for a moment, then looked at Gerald. Who covers the desk this week? She said. Priya can manage morning and midday, Gerald said. We'll need to find afternoon coverage. Dr. Finch nodded. Find it. The review took 3 weeks. Marcus received a copy of the summary on a Tuesday afternoon via email from Patricia, with a note that said only, "Call me when you've read it." He called her from his office after he'd read it twice. She's not returning, Patricia said. I know. There's also something else. A pause. During the staff interviews, 2 other parents were identified who'd experienced similar delays, both from the past 18 months. One of them had never filed anything because she didn't think it would go anywhere. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Outside his office window, the city was going about its mid-morning. Delivery trucks, a courier on a bicycle, a woman walking 2 large dogs that were attempting to go in different directions. The ordinary business of a day. "What's the school doing about them?" he said. Dr. Finch has already reached out to both families personally. She's also proposing a family liaison meeting in November where any parent with a front desk concern can raise it directly with the administration. Patricia paused. It's not nothing, Marcus agreed. There's a working group report going to the full board next Thursday, she said. New intake protocol. Digital check-in that's identical for every visitor, regardless of how familiar their face is or isn't. And mandatory bias awareness training for all security and front desk staff twice a year. Priya's going to be interim lead on the new protocol rollout, Patricia added. Dr. Finch made that call herself. Marcus thought of Priya in the stairwell, with her folder of papers and her careful sentence with edges on it. He thought of what it had cost her to say what she'd said in that building to a parent she didn't know. He thought of people who do the quiet right thing in difficult conditions. The teacher who crouches to retie a child's shoe. The 4th grader who moves her tray without making it a performance. And how often those things go unrecorded and unrewarded until someone finally pays attention. Good, he said. He picked up Zoe early on a Friday in November, not because a meeting had been canceled this time, because he had decided the week before that he wanted to. He sent a note to the school office on Wednesday, and the office acknowledged it. And when he walked through the front door on Friday at 2:30, there was a digital kiosk to his left and a staff member standing near it. Priya, in her yellow lanyard, with the composed professional expression of someone who had recently been given a new level of responsibility and was deciding every day to be equal to it. Mr. Whitfield, she said. Afternoon pickup for Zoe. That's right, he said. She checked him in with the same process photo ID system confirmation sticker with his name and his daughter's name that every parent would now go through in the same way, regardless of how long their child had attended the school, or what their face looked like, or who they did or didn't happen to know behind the desk. The whole thing took 55 seconds. She'll be down in a few minutes, Priya said. Ms. Okafor said she's finishing up something in class. No rush, Marcus said. He stepped to the side and waited near the corridor wall. And while he waited, he looked at the photograph of the Whitfield family wing, and then at the plaque beneath it, and then at the space between the two. The ordinary, ongoing life of the building that moved through that space every day. Kids and teachers and parents and staff, everyone in the continuous process of being somewhere, of belonging or not belonging, of being seen or not being seen. The building didn't know his name. It was just a building. But the people in it were making decisions every day about who they were going to be within it. Those decisions could be changed. He had always believed that. Zoe came down the stairs at a run, which Miss Okafor technically discouraged. You're early again, she said, reaching him. On purpose this time, he said. Did something happen? No, he said. I just wanted to be here. Zoe considered this. She looked around the lobby at the kiosk, at Priya at the photograph on the wall. Her face had that particular expression she got when she was putting something together, not asking about it yet, just assembling the pieces. Dad, she said. Yeah. Is that the library you built? She was pointing at the photograph. He looked at it. The foundation helped, he said. It wasn't just me. But your name is on it. It is. Zoe looked at him. Then why don't they know who you are? He picked up her backpack from where she'd dropped it on the floor, the way she always dropped it as soon as she got somewhere. "Some of them do," he said, "but the front desk lady didn't." "No," he said, "she didn't." Zoe chewed on this. "Do you think she would have treated you different if she did?" Marcus put his hand on his daughter's shoulder and moved them both gently toward the door. "Maybe," he said, "but I don't think that's the question that matters." Zoe pushed open the glass door and held it. The November air was cooler than October. A real cold now, with intention behind it. "What's the question that matters?" she said. "Whether she treats the next person correctly," he said. "Someone who doesn't have their name on a wall." They walked across the parking lot in the gray afternoon light. Zoe was quiet for a moment, and Marcus knew her well enough to know that quiet meant she was still working on something. "I think I get it," she said when they reached the car. "Yeah?" "It's like at lunch," she said. "It's not about me. It's about whoever comes next." He opened the car door. He looked at her, this 9-year-old person who had moved her lunch tray towards someone who was sitting alone, without making it a performance, without telling anyone about it, without needing anything in return. "Exactly," he said. "Exactly like that." 5 months later in the spring, a family arrived at Hargrove Preparatory Academy for their admissions interview. They had driven 2 hours from a smaller city. The mother carried her daughter's application materials in a folder. The daughter was 6 years old and had recently learned to read, and was by all accounts very serious about it. They walked through the front entrance. The digital kiosk greeted them. A staff member in a yellow lanyard looked up with a real smile, not a managed one, not a transactional one, but the kind of smile that communicates that your presence here is expected and welcome. "Good morning," Priya said. "You must be the Chen family. We've been looking forward to meeting you." The girl looked up at her mother. The mother looked around the lobby, at the photograph of the library wing, at the light falling through the glass doors, at the clean and unhurried atmosphere of the place, and something in her shoulders settled, just slightly, the way a person relaxes when they discover that the place they were not certain about is in fact somewhere they can be. The interview went well. The girl was offered a place in the incoming first grade class. When the acceptance letter arrived, the girl asked her mother to read it aloud. Twice. The school they were entering had recently revised its visitor intake protocol, its staff training calendar, and its formal definition of what consistent service meant. It had done so because a parent had been made to wait when he should not have been, and because someone had decided that a note in a file was not enough, and because another person in a stairwell with a folder of papers had said something true at some cost to herself and have been seen for doing it. These were small things. Most of the things that change institutions are small things done by ordinary people in the ordinary moments between the extraordinary ones. Zoe Whitfield would finish 4th grade with high marks and a reputation among her classmates for being someone who noticed when people needed to not be alone. Her father would continue to attend board meetings on Thursday evenings in a room with west-facing windows. He would continue to sign his name on documents and cast votes on policies that shaped the daily experience of hundreds of children and their families. He would do this without announcement, without expectation, and without requiring that anyone recognize his name before deciding he deserved to be somewhere. He had learned that from his mother, and now his daughter was learning it too. If this story stayed with you, we'd be glad to have you stay with us.